Hey, how's it going there, folks? Welcome back here to the weekend. Welcome back to Saturday. Goodness, weekend is upon us. June 1st, 2024. It's about 11:41 a.m. here, California time. Latest activity here on the Earthquake 3D globe shows a 2.6 into the region of Northern California. We'll get to the earthquake activity here in just a minute. Covering space weather activity, looks like we're getting another X flare here. Just in the last minute or so, currently sitting at an X 1.0. This is coming off of sunspot on the southeastern limb of the sun. Of course, the culprit of many X flares here recently, I believe. Latest imagery is a little bit behind, so we won't be able to see this X flare activity until here in a little bit. Once the imagery updates, but it does look like some further strong flaring coming in as we speak. There is the radio blackout, potential radio blackout, and some navigation system issues being observed there across the North American area, centered right over the North American continent right there. Look at that. Quite crazy, but don't expect any issues with cell phones or whatnot. Just basically low frequency navigation systems and some high frequency communication systems. Quite the flare going on, that's for sure. Earlier last night, we did see another X flare. So this makes technically 3 X flares here in the last 24 hours. And of course, all that is coming off of the sunspot, I believe. I'm going out on a limb here because I haven't seen the solar imagery that's showing me which sun. There we go. It just spoke those words into existence. So it is coming off that same sunspot, former 3664. That is renamed to 3697, and that was the culprit of many X flares last time it was out here on the Earth-facing side of the sun, and of course all the historic aurora event back in May as well. So this one, in position, definitely could be a little bit more geo-effective in terms of anything that should blast off. It's not necessarily the flare that affects or could create some issues here on Earth. I guess it can in terms of radio communications on the sunlit side of the Earth, but in terms of major impacts or potential major impacts, including the auroras, that is going to be associated with the CME activity. Any ejected material blasted off from a flare. Of course, that's that CME, coronal mass ejection, and that is what stirs up the auroras and really kicks things up in terms of that type of event. So the flaring activity just limited, even though these are pretty powerful flares. It doesn't affect us as much as a CME would. So we'll have to see if it's produced any type of, CME activity. But boy, it just doesn't want to calm down. 3697 there. 3 X flares in the last 24 hours. Let me see. It looks like we have peaked right there at an X1. And then last night we did see this is the 1-day chart. So look at that. 3 X flares in the last 24 hours. That's crazy. But we did see an X 1.4. And then this time, it was about this time yesterday here, or shortly thereafter, we've seen a similar X flare. So 3 X flares in the last 24 hours. That's some pretty good activity stirring up out here. There's a fairly significant solar prominence that's sitting here, pretty lengthy, facing the Earth. Now it's possible we could see one of these flares trigger a potential liftoff of this solar prominence here. We'll have to keep an eye on that because that's, ejected plasma that could take place there if we get that thing lifted off. And a lot of times it does. A flare will trigger that liftoff of a filament like that. So we'll keep an eye on that. 3697 right there. Look at that. Let's see. That was last night. So let's see what it looks like today. little bit further closer to the Earth-directed view. Quite dynamic. In fact, it looks like it's gaining some strength here around the center core. That's crazy. A long-duration sunspot. It's already in the history books. Could go back down into the history books again if this continues to produce, many more X flares, and who knows, maybe multiple CME activity, which would, in this position here, if it did something like it did here weeks ago with multiple CMEs in the Earth-directed view, we could see a repeat of what took place here back in May with the aurora activity. So it's something to watch. A little happy face right there, some blue eyes, and a little smile going on there. So we'll see what this sunspot has up its sleeve in the days ahead. Now, far as the auroras go, that was a complete miss last night. They were forecasting a G2 class storm. Now, this was due to a long duration X flare, and of course it came off of 3697 when it was much further out here, just on the southeastern limb here of the sun. But in this position here, anything that does blast off, even if it's a full halo CME, it would be directed away from the Earth. And in this case, that G2 class storm they were forecasting showed us on the very extreme edge of that CME, and it looks like it missed us because we didn't see anything stir up here overnight in terms of aurora activity or any elevated KP index. We talked about this last night. I believe that was just the arrival of some of the activity that we were expecting, but as you can see, it never did materialize into any significant type of solar storm. So there's the X1.4 that kicked off this morning. And of course, we got another X flare right now. Beautiful shot. I'm going to save this one here because I don't think we're, I've been saying that I don't think we're done here with this sunspot because it's not letting go. It's not letting up. Full charge ahead, it looks like. Now this here is going to be, of course, this is the third X flare in the last 24 hours, but I think it has produced, there was one, the long duration one, and then another one here, 5. I think it's produced 5 X flares already since its return trip here on the Earth-facing side of the sun, and numerous ones, including the largest solar flare this solar cycle, back when it was out here on the southwestern limb, about ready to disappear here off the Earth-facing side of the sun. That was a dandy of a one, but it was not Earth-directed. I'll show you guys the photo here. This was way out there on the southwestern limb, barely visible in terms of the actual sunspot, but that X flare, beautiful, an X 8.7. And then, of course, it took its whole trip around the sun, at least the far side of the sun, produced a massive explosion midpoint over there, and it's continuing to remain one of the more active sunspots I have ever seen. And we'll continue to keep an eye on it, folks, because this is something to watch here. We could be looking at some decent chances of auroras should we see decent CME activity being produced. In this position here where the Earth and the sun and the sunspot here kind of lined up, anything that does blast off here will be geo-effective. Days ago, yeah, that's an unfortunate event. We were just kind of a clipper CME type of event. We didn't get hit by it, and that's why we didn't see the auroras kick up. But this position here and the days ahead will put us more in a firing line in terms of anything that does blast off here from this massive, tremendously active sunspot. Looks like we're going down there, M8.1, but 3 X flares in the last 24 hours. Goodness. 35% chance for X flare probability still remains elevated, obviously, with the continue evolving sunspot here, 3697. It still looks quite complex here, and if anything, I think it's gaining some complexity. M flare at 75, C flare at 99% chance, and no major auroras in the forecast. Okay, for now. Earthquake activity. Well, let's see what we got here. A lot of this from yesterday. Did we got anything overnight as far as any larger movement goes? Doesn't look like it. In fact, a lot of this larger earthquake activity is from yesterday. The largest one today shows just a measly 5.1. I mean, that's not a big earthquake. This area sees earthquakes in the 5 range daily. This area around the Indonesia Islands area, New Guinea, is the crunch zone. And I call that the crunch zone because this is where all the plates here, the general arrows, look at that, all pointing here. I can't think of a better word for it than the crunch zone because it's where a lot of stuff takes place out here. A lot of subduction, volcanoes, island creating. It's a major area for high slip rate. The accumulated slip rate out here is quite high, and it doesn't take months and years for strain to build up out here. So a lot of this movement here from yesterday. Let's see what this one is. That's from yesterday as well. Kermadec Islands, Kermadec Trench area. Did see one more earthquake after midnight. Of course, this area did see a 6-pointer yesterday. Far as New Zealand goes, looks like a little bit of scattered activity down here, 3.6 South Island. Nothing big. The white or the lighter color rings here, wings, are indicative of newer earthquake activity. And you can see there's a lot of red color rings indicating older activity from yesterday here on the globe. But in the crunch zone, still seeing some typical 4s, 3s, and even some 5s out there. Older movement across China. A little bit of newer activity here across the Mediterranean. Doesn't look like there's any major swarms going on. The Atlantic Ocean seen a handful of earthquakes there yesterday and today. South America and Middle America Trench roughly about the same. A little bit of newer, deeper activity here into the region that you're seeing right here. It's pretty major subduction zone, and that's some deep activity triggering into the Peru-Chile Trench. North American region up here, we've been somewhat active with some earthquake activity into the Intermountain West areas here. Now, Great Salt Lake City area, this region up here around the Bluebell Study area, showing a little bit of earthquake activity this morning as well with a 3.1. This area has seen some swarming in the past, just to the southwest. Excuse me. And that kind of came and went without any other main quake, any large quake activity. And now we're getting a little bit of movement further to the northeast here of that swarming area. So we're going to have to keep an eye on this because it does look like regional stress out here in the area with that 3.1 popping up this morning away from that swarming area. No swarming right now, but very close to that region that did see some past swarming. Up into Montana, I've seen a little 3-pointer as well, just outside the Bozeman area. 12 kilometers deep for that 3.1. That's about the only one showing up. I guarantee you that earthquake showed up on Yellowstone, which is, of course, northwestern Wyoming area. Looks like that's going to be the 3.1 showing up all across the park. Aside from that, really not a whole lot of local activity stirring up out here across Yellowstone, but it just goes to show you that these 3-pointers, even distance away, can show up on the appropriately working seismograph stations out here. And it looks like the majority of them did pick it up, so that except for over here across this area. But just tells me that things are working properly out there on these seismograms, digital seismograms here. All right, rest of the country out here, some movement north near Lake Erie, outside of Cleveland, Ohio. Now this area, not a major player in terms of producing earthquakes, but they do get occasional small quakes out here. 2.6 overnight and a 1.7 as well. That earthquake activity, I think it's the first we've seen here in the last 30 days. Well, it looks like there was one more back in early May. Same area, but, you know, not common, but it does sit, you know, in an area that can see some earthquake activity. That's why this is all kind of colored from the USGS in terms of the potential U.S. hazard areas. Of course, the darker red color imagery, more hazardous zones. That's a new Madrid seismic zone down here, and this is where, past large earthquake activity has taken place and faults exist. Some ancient faults out here as well that I'm sure haven't been discovered. And, we may see earthquake activity pop up from time to time on some of these. But there you can see this region of Ohio in that little very small zone of hazard potential in terms of earthquake activity. Oklahoma, Texas, still getting some activity out in the oil fields around the Pacific Northwest. Not a whole lot there across Mount St. Helens for now. We'll check that a little bit later on this evening. California, the Bay Area around San Francisco, 2.6. That one coming in about 8 kilometers deep, just off the notorious Hayward Fault Zone, a dangerous fault that runs through the Bay Area, East Bay, through a highly populated area, including Oakland area, San Leandro, Hayward, Fremont. This area is primed for a big one, for sure. Of course, 1906, the last big one here on the northern segment of the San Andreas Fault. But the Hayward Fault here has a decent chance of seeing some large-scale earthquake activity in the near future. And again, it runs through some major populated areas of the Bay region, as you can see there on the map. Darker the imagery, the more populated it is. And that earthquake coming in just off of it, looks like. But we'll keep an eye on that for sure. Further down south into Southern California and whatnot, looks like a typical day down here. Really no major swarming going on, no unusual activity, nothing above 2.5. Up here in the, I forgot to cover this though, but up around the Cobb Mountain area, north of the Bay Area, here in Northern California, got a decent swarm going on. But this is all very common, because there's these power plants down here that utilize the heated areas below, and Clear Lake Volcanic Field, obviously active, but not due to volcanic activity. These earthquakes are not due to volcanic activity, things getting ready to erupt out here. This is all a process involved where these power plants create energy by injecting raw sewage into the surface areas or into the subsurface area below to create some type of dry steam, and it does in fact create earthquake activity as well. And there's numerous plants out here. I can't remember exactly how many there is, but there's probably more now since the last time I was down here. Those are clouds. But yeah, kind of an interesting way to make energy, but hey, whatever works, right? Got a little small microquake coming in here now in the last few minutes here. It looks like since I've been talking about this on the Hayward Fault, there was a 2.6. Now we got a 1.9 in this area. So keep an eye on Bay Area. Does look like things wanting to move out here. Alaska, seen a small amount of earthquake activity up here. Nothing big, 3s and some 2s. A little bit of movement throughout the Cook Inlet area. But aside from that, it's a major subduction zone, and earthquakes happen every day, just like in California. The 2.5 map and above, yeah, there's a handful. Looks like 4.2 here, the latest there in the Cook Inlet area this morning. But major subduction zone. California is not a major subduction zone. You got a different type of fault boundary here. Subduction zone exists up here across the Cascadia, but this is this is definitely not like the subduction zone that exists up here. This is in itself has a whole slower process. And by the way, it looks pretty quiet. There's not a whole lot going on the Cascadia for now. Let's see here. What else? Hawaii. I keep forgetting about Hawaii because there's really not a whole lot going on out here right now. We're just waiting for this thing to see what it wants to do in terms of the Kilauea volcano. Not a whole lot of earthquake activity on it right now. Inflation obviously quite high, and it has been. But we're just at a stationary standstill in terms of what to expect or what to look forward to. So let's see what we got here. I'm going to check the raw data, seismograph stations there. Not a whole lot coming in. One little lonesome earthquake here, handful of background noise. The deformation data, let's see what it looks like here today. It's still going up. And the overall trend here looks like it will continue to go up for a little bit before following similar trends here. I'm assuming it will. If it does keep going up and up and up, then obviously we've got some changes going on here near future, in the real soon future. But this is the past month here. Each level higher than the one before. This is the highest level now observed since 2018. So we're going to either see a couple different scenarios. We're going to see another magma displacement from the summit area, potentially off to the southwest rift zone once again, like it did last time in February. That relieved a lot of stress up here. We actually seen the magma go across tilt stations off here in this area. Or we could see maybe a magma intrusion off to the east rift zone. That'd be the worst case scenario, because that's when the last decent or heavy duty eruption took place out here, with fissure activity opening up across the east rift zone, and it did damage quite a few homes out here. But we'll continue to watch it, keep an eye on it. As far as Iceland goes, the Live from Iceland site is the site to check out for all your visual needs on eruptions. Sound like a commercial there, huh? Although right now it does look like it's obscured here. Not a whole lot going on, at least from a visual perspective. Let me see what we got. Yeah, not a whole lot to see right now. I'm assuming it's still going on out there, but it looks pretty cloudy and foggy and hard to tell. I mean, if you look at this map, this thing could probably, there's all sorts of shapes and stuff that you could probably make out here in the imagery, but there's really not a whole lot of volcanic viewing right now. This update was put out yesterday here from the Icelandic Met Office, stating that things are relatively stable over the past 24 hours, but that was yesterday. So I'm guessing things are still remaining active there in the eruption stage across the Iceland area. All right, so there's our X flare once again coming back down. To me, it doesn't look like there's an eruptive component with this X flare. Most of the time, when we get a CME or a large decent CME, this will be thicker. Instead of coming right back up and then right back down on a chart, we'll see this pop up to an X flare, and then it will take a long time for it to come back down, and that will make a thicker line here on the graph, indicating a long duration and potential CME associated with that solar flare. But that's still a decent amount of activity. 3 X's in the last 24 hours. Wow. Weather outlook here today. Severe weather continues with looks like 2% scattered areas out here of tornado activity. Wind and hail threats appear to be the main threats out here today across these areas listed on the map. Looks like maybe Carlsbad, New Mexico area included in that as well. So just a heads up, if you're out there enjoying this weekend, tomorrow roughly about the same, but a little bit further northward into the northern plains, and that will bring with it a 2% chance for tornadoes up there. Wind and hail threats appear to be the main severe weather potential out here for tomorrow. All right, folks, seismograph stations out here look pretty quiet. Not a whole lot of large-scale movement to observe here on the graphs. So we'll be off here on the side enjoying this beautiful day here in Northern California. We'll be keeping an eye on things out here and, of course, provide any updates that take place in terms of severe weather, large earthquake activity, space weather events, you name it. We'll try to get it covered out here. Have a good one, folks. Enjoy your Saturday. We'll catch you guys back out here a little bit later on this evening. Take care. That scared me for a second. I thought maybe I didn't record this.